Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast.
Welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm, of course, your host with the most, Phil Better. And today's guest, I'm happy to have on because he's going to help us clean our legal woes, ladies and gentlemen. Our guest is the founder and CEO of Legislate, which was founded in April 2020 using machine learning. Legislate makes contracts machine-readable using patented knowledge graph technology. Before founding this company, our guest brought machine learning solutions to the market for 3 years at Mind Foundry, a spin-out from the University of Oxford. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our guest, Charles Brecque. Charles?
Thank you, Phil, for having me.
You're very welcome. Legislate does not look, it's not written how it sounds. That's all I'm saying. That's why I can't say the word. But yes, Charles, thank you so much for being here. How about you give us a quick introduction, a bit about yourself before we jump into it?
Sure. So I'm not a lawyer, full disclosure, but in my previous role, I was doing business development and just found it really frustrating how long I'd have to wait for legal teams to review our contracts, approve amendments. And we were losing momentum because time is the biggest killer of deals. But we were quite literally losing deals post-legal negotiation because it would have taken so long that the buyer would get promoted or lose budget or simply lose interest. So the whole idea behind Legislate is how do we empower the business user to create a contract from A to Z without needing to get legal involved at every single step. And we're not necessarily trying to automate lawyers or replace lawyers. It's more that they are super busy. They have a lot of high value, high priority tasks to do. And in our opinion, the low value, high volume contracts that business users need and create can be safely delegated using a platform like Legislate. Obviously, to do that, you need to digitize contracts and the whole process around that. That doesn't just mean uploading a PDF to the cloud and expecting it to be machine readable and lawyer approved, etc. So really, when we say that we make contracts machine readable, what that means is we model the concepts within the contract, the relations, the data, all within very powerful technology called knowledge graphs, so that business users can safely create contracts that have consistent data, and more importantly, contracts that can then be queried, searched, post-signature. So that's pretty much what Legislate does.
So it does it, just so that I understand, because that's a lot for someone who's not in the machine learning and that world. So let's say I'm a small to medium sized business. I'm looking to hire a bunch of people. I need to get the NDAs created. I could, in essence, have a template of an NDA that I want to use. I can put it into Legislate and it can create more customizable NDAs for that?
Yeah, so that's the plan. Right now, what we do is we offer NDAs so that you don't need to faff around with finding a template.
There we go.
And our templates are highly customizable so that they can be tailored to your specific situation in a way which is consistent. Because I think one key thing that entrepreneurs do, especially if they're trying to cut costs on legal, is they will proofread a contract themselves, remove a clause, add their own, and ultimately expect that their contract to be valid and to give them the right amount of protection, which of course is not true. So really what we do is we give them the tools to customize in a safe and robust way.
So it's even better than what I thought it was. You provide the template. I just have to put in the information, and then you could provide us with something to cover our butt from any legal issues, from NDAs to different types of contracts and that, correct?
That's right.
Wow, that is amazing. That's a huge time, like you said, it's a huge time saver because the lawyers don't have to deal with the nuances. They can just do the once over of this created template, say, yeah, it works well, or change one little thing and then it's off, and they go from having to write it to just approving it. Wow. It saves so much time. How did you come up with, so the idea came from when you were working at Mind Foundry?
Yeah, I was issuing NDAs or receiving NDAs. I was issuing proof of concept contracts, sales agreements, and I just felt that I was spending a lot of time with contracts, a lot more than what I expected.
What's like the next goal? Like right now you create the contracts. Are you looking at a potential, and if this on the roadmap, I don't know, but to analyze contracts to see whether or not it's a beneficial to the company?
I think that's definitely on the roadmap. However, a lot of the contracts that we work with are relatively standard. For example, NDAs, employment contracts, consultancy agreements, and they don't necessarily have that much negotiation. So us providing the template means that we can guarantee that the contracts are standard and fair and robust. I think when we do open the platform up to third-party templates, then there might be some analysis of those agreements to determine if they have all the valid ingredients or if they're missing anything or if there's anything which is a bit unusual. But I think in terms of roadmap, our focus right now is offering a great end-to-end contracting experience for non-lawyers. I think that's really important. Although business users create contracts, they're not always used to creating contracts at every single stage. So we really make it simple and transparent for them to go from start to finish and achieve that. I'd say what we also allow them to do is to access the data in their contracts, because if you're just issuing PDF documents, even if it is via a DocuSign or whatever electronic signature platform, it's really difficult when you're going through due diligence, or if you need to report to your CFO or report to whoever it is in the business about the data in your contracts. It's really difficult unless you've been maybe manually creating and maintaining a spreadsheet on the side with key data. Whereas with Legislate, it's really easy to answer questions like, how many of my employees are on 30-day notice period, or how many in this department haven't had a pay increase in 2 years, because all that data sits in the contracts, and we make that data searchable. So that's sort of what we can do today. And then to answer the question about roadmap, it's really opening up the template so that clients can enter in agreements. It's importing existing contracts that have already been signed so that they can track the data. And it's also then connecting the data in the contracts to the tools and systems that are used, on the one hand, so that all those systems can sync to Legislate and ensure that there's a single source of truth for contract data, but also then allow various parts of contracts to be set up. So, for example, if you're hiring an employee, you then need to set up pensions, payroll, and a multiple of other things which are described in the contract. Because we know what's in the contract, we could theoretically just set all of that up directly. So that's sort of where we're heading.
Jesus, that's insane. You're taking over. Like, I'm super excited for what machine learning can do for businesses and AI can help do for entrepreneurs in this. And just hearing how you guys are just focused on that end to end, just the whole legal department is amazing, because people just have a one-stop shop. Like, if a company can't afford lawyers and need to have these NDAs and that, they can go over, pay you a nominal fee, have these contracts, and are able to use it going forward, and have the robustness of pretty much a great legal team behind them. That's an awesome thing. Why did you start becoming an entrepreneur? Like, what was it that called to you to be an entrepreneur?
I think I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, even though it wasn't necessarily obvious when or how I'd become an entrepreneur. I joined Mind Foundry straight out of uni, so they were a startup, and now a bigger company. And I've always worked in startups, and I think when I joined, I wasn't too sure what it would take to be a founder or a CEO, but I was able to gain a lot of exposure around what it means. I had a lot of freedom to sort of grow into my role and just learn a lot about startups and business. And then I think when I had the problem, it was also at a point in my startup journey with Mind Foundry that I realized that actually, and maybe it's also because I was young and, well, I guess I'm still young, but younger and naive, that this is a real problem that I experienced, and I don't think anyone has can say that they're truly satisfied with contracts. I think even lawyers aren't truly satisfied with contracts. So it's a real problem. Yes, many businesses have tried to solve it in one way or another, but no one's really tried to solve that problem for business users in an end-to-end way, and no one's really trying to solve that problem in a way where you're not just churning out documents, you're actually trying to work out what's in those documents, and if the data is actually good, and what you can do with that data. So it seemed like a real problem. I was naive enough to think that I could solve this with my limited work experience, and then I was fortunate enough to have some mentors who also happened to be angel investors who, when I brought the idea to them, they said, go do it, and here's some initial angel funding to get started. So I guess those were sort of the three factors which meant that it was a good time to start Legislate, and here we are almost 3 years later.
I love that. What was it like once you got that angel investing? You got, okay, people trust me with my idea. They don't think I'm too grandiose. So to start building out the teams and that, like, what was the initial reaction for you when you thought? Did you initially believe that they would be investors when you pitched the idea to them? I know I'm like throwing 18 questions at you. It's just I'm fascinated by this.
I guess I was naive and expected there to be investors for this idea, and for me, I think the reality is I was able to raise angel funding from friends, family, but also some of the angels who were investors in Mind Foundry, and therefore knew of my track record, and therefore were willing to sort of bet on me. But I think at that point in time, I only had 3 years of professional experience at a startup that no one had heard of. So, or at least outside of the Oxford ecosystem. So I think yes, it would have been difficult to raise funding outside of those circles.
Okay. Have you had a moment or a memory or a win from one of your clients or customers that you like to share with us that just like proves, like, that just cements that you're not the only one who had this problem and you solved an issue for a lot of people?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had over 200 clients, and whether that's on a usage based or on a recurring basis, I think it's a very easy to use platform, and I think also when we started the company, it was the beginning of lockdown, and we had a lot of inbound from clients in property, so landlords, letting agents who are looking to create residential contracts through Legislate, because they didn't necessarily appreciate the underlying technology. For them, it was a way of not having to meet tenants, and because they couldn't, and get those contracts signed. And I think we've got a lot of success stories, whether that's with large property owners, or we've got Trinity College from the University of Oxford who use us for their accommodation agreements. So I think in all those cases, we've really helped automate a high volume, there is a lot of customization ultimately with these contracts, even though it's the contracts themselves are standard. But they're issuing hundreds of contracts a year. A lot of that volume comes in over the space of a couple of months, and typically they would hire people just for the contracting season. And thanks to Legislate, they're no longer able to do that. So that's obviously a key success for them. But I think the other key success is that they're able to report the data in the contracts to the accommodation managers, etc., because ultimately the financial data in those rental agreements is not well captured, and they can easily share it now with Legislate.
And this is for people all over the world, not just specifically in the UK.
Right now, we're UK focused, but I'd say definitely over the next 12 months, we're going to start opening up our platform to other jurisdictions.
Okay. What tip would you have for someone who's going from the startup world to starting their own, like someone working it with for a startup, so generally doing the 9 to 5 world, but in a very engaging place that is the startup, to transitioning into becoming or starting their own startup? Do you have any tips for them? Maybe some pitfalls to avoid that you jumped into it with an early jump?
I think startups exist if there's funding, and if there's no funding, then ultimately you need to have a product. Um, and I think when you start a business, you need to have one or the other. Ideally, you have both. But I think until you have those two as a minimum, it's all about creating an environment where you can maybe work on the startup outside of your 9 to 5. Obviously, you need to make sure that contractually you're allowed to, because otherwise you might end up in a situation where you've been working outside of hours and all the IP belongs to the company, to the employer. So I think it's all about just having safety nets, whether that's savings that you could then use to invest in the product, whether that's being able to work on the product outside of hours, whether it's being able to build a network of investors outside of ours who know your track record and are willing to back you. But I think it's just those are sort of the key things. And once you have those safety nets in place, then it sort of de-risks the whole process of starting a business. I think that's my answer.
Great answer. We're gonna move over to the Spark question of the show. It's by Seek Discomfort, a great YouTube channel, making sure that you can learn and to go past your boundaries and find what fear is. So, in what way has your life exceeded your expectations?
I definitely didn't think we'd make it this far as a startup, and it's not that I didn't think we could. It's more that it's obviously you project yourself years in the future, but the reality is it's really difficult to project yourself further than 6 months away. So I'm amazed that we've managed to grow the team to 12, still be around after 3 years, and we're just closing a funding round, which will allow us to double the team. So I think these are all things which we aspire to, and I'm very happy that as a company we've been able to reach those milestones, and I can only imagine where we'll be in 12 months' time.
Oh, hey, when you open to different markets, like I'm super excited because I know a lot of people, a lot of realtors who are going to be biting at the bit for this. Charles, I'm going to jump off screen here. I'm going to give you the last little bit. Please let my audience know where they can follow you guys, support you guys, and all that wonderful stuff. The floor is yours.
Yep. So our website is www.legislate.tech, and we can be found on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, by simply searching for Legislate. And if you want to get in touch via email, you can send us an email at info@legislate.tech.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles, I want to thank you very much for showing up today and sharing us about Legislate. I'm never going to be able to pronounce that word ever again. I swear, it's all your fault. But also for sharing your story with us. Charles, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and giving the opportunity to talk about Legislate. And we'll come up with a better name.
To my audience, remember the links will be down in the show notes to support Legislate. I don't think I can just say the word. I think it's one of those, like, it's Worcestershire sauce. It's like one of those words. I think it's forever going to be burnt into my mind. But yes, you can support the company down below. If you are in the UK, check out, see if it's you're able to use it. I want to thank you for listening, and always remember to invest in yourself.